What's the best way to subtly F with someone? It was only a few weeks, but a supervisor on a construction site I worked on was complaining about the birds in front of his office. That night, I went out to a pet shop and bought a big bag of bird seed. I hid it nearby, and when the coast was clear, I would scatter a couple of handfuls. It took a few days, but more and more birds started stopping by to look for food. Had over 30 pigeons out there one morning when he came in. I let him in on what I was doing one day when he'd pretty much given up and was throwing old bread out for the birds. He later asked me to pick up another bag of seed, as he'd taken over throwing out the seed and ran out. Story 2. Back in the day, I used to cold call in a crappy sales job, and eventually I got bored. When I would ask for Mr. Smith and they would say, "He's not here, can I take a message?" I used to leave messages. Tell him he was right, it's not going to fit. Or, tell him it'll have to be the blue one, the red one isn't available. Or, we can't do 7 o'clock because my cat's not doing well. If they queried it any further, and they usually didn't, I'd say, don't worry, he will know what it means. I like to think I've left a legacy of people scratching their heads for days. Story 3. One of my best friends was working as a section manager in a retail store. He bought a box of 400 rubber duckies off Amazon and started leaving a single one on his boss's desk at random times. Never said a word to her about it and would pick odd times to do it to throw her off the scent. Like if he came on an off day to shop, he'd sneak one in. He'd come in 30 minutes before his shift started just to do it. He'd stay late to do it as well. He did this for 6 months before he got promoted and got a transfer. On his last day of work, he walked into her office with a box of the rest of them, turned it upside down on her desk. She hit something like a combo of hysterical laughter and sobbing. "Oh my gosh, I thought I was going insane." I'm enjoying these stories so far. These are a lot of fun. Story 4. Every week, I'd buy 2 or 3 picture frames at the dollar store. I would find pictures of ugly babies online or odd celebrities, and I would leave it on people's desks. No one ever found out it was me. I imagine after I left for another job, they pieced it together though. Most people would get a laugh, though I remember one specific person got super mad. I put a picture of Maury Povich and wrote, "You are not the father," and added a fake autograph. The person who sat there went in that morning and instantly yelled at everyone, "Whoever's been doing this stupid crap, I'm not participating in these stupid office jokes, so leave me out of them." He then went and violently smashed the frame into the trash. One of my favorite ones, though, we had an insurance rep who would come in and explain benefits to the new hires. She would give everyone a card with her picture on it. One day, I found a glorious picture frame in the shape of a heart, with a glittery mess of a bedazzled sign that said, "Always and forever." So naturally, I put her picture in Photoshop and blew it up. The quality was horrible, but it just made it that much better because of the frame. It looked like a picture you'd find acceptable to frame if you were the type of person who would buy that type of frame. Then I stayed late and left it on my manager's desk. I left it facing the door so it appeared like one of those pictures people put of their family facing you when you speak to them at their desk. This meant when he opened the door, he would see it instantly because of how loud the frame was. Well, before he could see it, he injured himself and he couldn't come into work, so it just sat in his office. He only came in about a week later, specifically to welcome a new team member. And of course, the benefits rep was there to walk the new member through their options. And of all effing days, this was the first time I heard her ask him if he had a minute to talk. He said yes, and they go into his office. The second he opens the door, he gives a very nervous laugh and says, "Crap, I think I can explain." Then the door shut behind them. Everyone heard him, but no one else knew what had happened. Everyone in the office looked at each other in confusion and shrugged at each other. I sat at my desk with my face in pain and tears in my eyes from trying so hard not to laugh. Story 5. When I was a kid in the 80s, my neighbor used to go on vacation for 2 weeks every year during the summer, and he relied on his friend, my dad, to go get his mail and check on his house, which my dad did. My neighbor loved elaborate Christmas lights, like all over his entire house, and that took a lot of work, so he left them up all year and only turned them on at Christmas time. So for 2 weeks of the summer, my dad would turn his friend's Christmas lights on during the summer. but no one else in the neighborhood knew what was going on. Every once in a while, someone in the neighborhood would mention it, and he would act all confused because he was. My grandpa used to work with a guy during the 60s who used to brag about gas mileage. So his whole office would pitch in and buy gas and siphon it into his car so his gas would last way longer than it should, like weeks, and he would come in and brag about it, and then everyone would just laugh at him. Story 6. One time, my buddy Steve was at my house and the phone rang. The call display showed his number, so I knew it had to be his roommate, probably looking for him. I picked up the receiver and immediately asked, "Hi, is Steve there?" There was a pause, then, no, he's out. Just as quick, I said, "Okay, cool, I'll try again later. Bye," and hung up. It was probably a good minute before she called back to call me an idiot. Story 7. My colleague went on a stag do with a friend of mine. Top line, absolutely nothing happened. My mate said it was very tame and no controversy. Anyway, upon his return, he walked past me, and I said, "I heard about what happened at the stag." He immediately went bright red and said, "What have you heard?" I simply replied, "Don't worry, your secret is safe with me," and went on with my day. He has spent the last week demanding to know what I know, whilst going up to colleagues and asking if they'd heard me say anything. Further context, I'm known as the quiet one in the office, which made it much more believable. Story 8. Not subtle at all. I used to work for a real jerk who demanded a conference call every Monday at 8 a.m. with around 50 people on the call. He would yell and belittle everyone on how stupid we all were. We never found out who, but someone bought a cheap gag gift that would say, "F you," when you pressed the button. They started using it every week on the call, and it drove the boss crazy. He made a huge diagram on a dry board tracking who was on the call each week and who was on vacation. It went on for over a year, and he was never, to this day, able to figure out who it was. I didn't know they made those kinds of buttons. I've only ever seen the "that was easy" type of ones. Story 9. This is oddly specific but funny. When I was in college, all the theater kids went abroad to London, almost as tradition. I didn't go anywhere because I didn't have the money, but one of the theater kids, who was a friendly rival of mine, went to France. While he was gone, I just kept telling people he was in London. At first they questioned it, but I just kept driving it home. By the time he got back, everyone kept asking him how London was. After 4 months of that, he got real sick of it. And then I photoshopped him into some of the London photos and submitted them to the school's study abroad photo contest and got them on the university's website. It was a great long-term prank. Story 10. My manager, who was very chill, had his desk out the back. I noticed once when he was showing me something on his phone, he always had NFC turned on. He also had a habit of placing his phone on one particular spot of his desk when working. Idea, bling, bling, bling. I had a few of these white NFC stickers. Basically just a little chip in a small white sticker that mobile phones read when being placed over top or near it. Basically the same tech as PayWave. You could program the chip to perform actions on the phone. I placed a few in the spot where he usually placed the phone. Since the stickers were white, they blended in perfectly to his desk. I programmed the sticker to open YouTube on his phone and play a specific meme or cursed video of my choosing, which would happen daily, so much so that he thought his phone was faulty and reset it, yet the problem still prevailed. He was so confused. I eventually confessed my crimes and he thought it was hilarious. It then became a routine to set his QR code to a new meme every day when he's away from his desk. Story 11. A few months ago, I met one of my neighbors. She told me her and her husband's names. I've seen them around, so I know who her husband is. A few days ago, I'm outside, and I see him coming the other way. Smile and wave, "Hi, Bob," as if I've known him for years. He says, "Hi," back, like he just can't remember my name right now. That's going to be a slow burn. I am very distinctive looking, so pretty quickly he'll be thinking, surely I'd remember a 3-foot-tall black woman with green spiky hair. All details changed to protect my identity, of course. Story 12. Way back in the day, before TVs would display every little thing, you could change the volume and brightness without it registering on the screen. My friend and I would take the remote while his little brother was watching the TV and very slowly turn down the brightness, like one click of the button every 30 seconds. Eventually, it was nearly black, and he could never figure out what was going on. we would claim that we could see the TV just fine. Story 13. 6 months after we broke up, I realized somehow my Spotify is connected to my ex's Alexa. So now sometimes at 5 a.m., I accidentally, on purpose, connect to it and play Top 50 Most Annoying Songs of All Time. I see the song stop, and then I press play again. We do a back and forth until he gives up. That's what you get when you F with your flight instructor, Brent. That's kind of awesome. Just out of curiosity, don't give me your top 50, but what's your most annoying song of all time? Story 14. During my first semester at college, my roommate always had girls over in our single-room dorm, forcing me to sleep in the common area and shower at the gym. As revenge, I started putting a Jolly Rancher candy inside our bathroom showerhead. Every morning they'd shower together, but when rinsing off in the shower, there'd be a thin layer left of sugar on their skin and in their hair. The girls stopped coming over because they all felt sticky and gross throughout the day, leading them to attribute that unclean feeling to my roommate. By the beginning of the second semester, he couldn't get a date, which was 99% of the reason he was even in college. So he dropped out. I had the dorm room to myself for the rest of the year. The first change I made was removing the remains of the Jolly Rancher from the showerhead. Story 15. During the Cold War, the East German State Security Police would monitor suspected dissidents and enemy agents. They'd place bugs in their apartments, and when they were out, they'd rearrange things, maybe hide things, maybe just move them around a bit. Nothing huge, but the suspects would come home to find the place had been trashed, like it had been tossed for clues. Things would be different. The feeling of being watched and of being effed with would grow over time till the suspect couldn't sleep anymore, couldn't operate normally, utterly paranoid, not knowing who was an informant, who might be an agent. Story 16. Be very nice to them, always. I was a DSD driver, direct store delivery. Many of the items you see at the supermarket are DSD, not stocked by the store. For example, Coke, Nabisco, Hallmark, all stocked by the vendor. We have to deal with receivers at the loading dock. Receivers, in some cases, are trained to be unfriendly with vendors, be suspicious of vendors in the short stocking, etc. One receiver rode my butt cheeks each time I delivered. He'd berate me, insult me, yell, but I noticed that he did it to all the vendors. So I indulged him, always smiled, never yelled back, took all his insults on the chin. After all, I was only there for a half an hour once a week. Finally, after a year, with no one on the dock but the two of us, he approached me and asked, "Why are you always smiling? You never shout back, you take all the crap I give to you, and you never get upset. What the heck is wrong with you?" I replied in a soft, monotone voice, inches from his face with a look that was clearly trying to restrain anger. "I'm sorry that I am upsetting you. Please understand that is not my intent. My therapist and I have worked out strategies for times like these so that I do not act on my inner emotions and get in trouble again. I hope you understand." And then I walked out. You know, he never messed with me again. Story 17. I'm a teacher. I like to make that little water droplet sound by flicking my cheek and whistling outward as I do it. The younger kids always ask, "What was that noise?" And I always say, "I don't know. I didn't hear anything." A few I've had for years and they still haven't figured it out. I just keep gaslighting all these children. I can't believe I get paid for this crap. Story 18. When I was a young E-nothing corpsman in the Navy, we took turns doing the coffee mess for the week. Whenever it was my turn, I would switch out for decaf for the whole week. Then the next week, I'd switch it back to regular cut with espresso. Let me tell you, watching all these khakis lose their crap from the caffeine detox one week and then look all jittery and messed out the next was phenomenal. When I eventually gained some rank and left that command, I taught my little trick to one of the juniors. Some traditions must be upheld. Story 19. My brother-in-law upset my younger sister. My older sister decided to teach him a lesson. For the next several months, he began receiving the most random items via the U.S. Postal Service with no return address, no letter, no explanation. What was sent? Sawdust, pocket lint, acorns, twigs, leaves, sand, amongst a dozen other harmless items. The kicker? My sister did not send all of these items from one location, or even just herself. She got her friends and close colleagues involved. Due to the nature of her circle, the postmarks originated in locations from across the U.S. He received random crap from something like 28 different states and Canada. eventually started to freak out and wanted to call the police and the FBI before they finally caved and told him. My brother-in-law learned to compromise on home decor decisions going forward. Story 20. Back in college, I lived with a group of 5 complete knuckleheads in a big house. One of them had a super sweet cat named Riblet. The roommate who owned the cat stole one of my other roommate's boyfriends. The spurned roommate and another roommate took turns crapping in the cat's litter box, but did it infrequently enough and stealthily enough that the other roommate thought his cat was sick. I only feel bad for little Riblet, who I imagine coming into his own litter box was like, "What the heck is going on in here?" Story 21. When I was about 14, an older brother was 17. He was a real violent jerkhead. He made my life a living nightmare. He would take deep naps every afternoon, so I would go to the kitchen and get the bottle of vegetable oil and put a tablespoon or so in the cap. I'd sneak in his room, and with a Q-tip, I dispensed tiny drops of oil all over the exposed skin. He was a very pretty guy, so to turn into a pizza pie all over his face, neck, back, arms was enormously distressing. He went on multiple medications. I probably did this for about 2 years. You want to beat up a girl who was half your size on the reg? He was bigger, I admit it, but I was smarter. Story 22. Picture this. 16-year-old boy comes home from an exhausting day being a 16-year-old boy, heads to his bedroom, flings himself on the bed and reaches for the TV remote. He presses the button. He presses the button, then presses the button harder. Nothing. The fun starts right here, because I'd put a small piece of black tape over the infrared receiver on his TV. So nothing to see on the remote itself. This was essential, because I knew he would suspect my involvement immediately. His first thought was that I'd turn one of the batteries around. Not bad reasoning, I thought. So accusations and denials fly back and forth. New batteries are located and inserted, but alas, the problem still persists. It was such fun listening to his frustration and hearing him having to get out of bed to change channels. I left it in place for several months. Then, after present opening on Christmas Day, I told him I had a little extra present for him in his room. He watched as I removed the littlest bit of tape from his TV. Marvelous! He's 29 now. Haha, such fond memories.